Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly Potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. It's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. We'll talk about sports topics of local interest, maybe a national topic we'll get into. We've got some Bengals Ring of Honor to certainly talk about, and my favorite portion of the podcast where you can ask me a question on anything. Go to the X first, hit up the hashtag AskSkinnyAnything. You ask them, Rick compiles them, and I try to answer them. They do not have to be sports related. I'm coming to you live, he says, from the Little Mermaid suite here at Walt Disney World.
I was just going to ask what was going on in the background with that curtain, my man.
Yep, it's the Walt Disney World Little Mermaid curtain here.
You also have the hotel door right behind you for those that are listening to this. So I was wondering, are you in a hostage situation or what's going on here?
Well, the rest of the room is compiled with women's stuff everywhere, just everywhere. I've got my little corner of the world over here by myself.
Yeah, nice. All right, good deal. Well, Skinny, you are now in Orlando, but I don't believe that's an alibi for you. I don't think you're trying to get away from what happened in Louisville this weekend. I don't believe you're a part of this arrest, although I did have text messages asking me what role you played because people, of course, listened to last week's podcast where they knew you went to the practice round. They heard about you helping the elderly ladies onto the bus that had their legs cramped up, that couldn't walk anymore. And then on Friday morning, all hell broke loose down at Valhalla as part of the PGA Championship. As we're recording this podcast right now here on Thursday morning, the Louisville police are actually holding a news conference discussing the case against the number one golfer in the world, Scottie Scheffler, after he was charged with felony assault of a police officer over the weekend. It all stemmed from an incident where Scheffler tried to drive around an officer who was directing traffic after a death happened. They're having an investigation after a death happened from a traffic incident. And the officer was allegedly dragged by Scheffler's car. At least that's what it says in the police report. Then reports came out on Wednesday stating that top Louisville police officials have expressed concern over the severity of the charges. A lot of people thought the charges might be dropped altogether. That hasn't happened. Like I mentioned, they're in a press conference right now. We don't know what they've said to this point. But Skinny, first of all, how much of a role did you play in all of this?
I played none. I was not there that day, so I absolved myself of that. I did have a friend of mine who was there with his dad, who had a great story of he was about a mile and a half from the golf course. And of course it was just chaos. He decided they were going to Uber down. And then he said it worked out okay. It wasn't as smooth as he thought. He said, coming back though, one of the volunteers told him, so are you taking a bus out of here? What do you? He goes, no, we're Uber. He goes, nah, it'll be 2.5 hours for you to get out of here. So I had told him, take the shuttle bus. And he had to take the shuttle bus back to Freedom Hall to take an Uber back to his hotel right by Valhalla. I will say it is a wonky setup. I could see how somebody who opted to try to cross that road in the dark and a bus driver not seeing him, there was some parking across the road. I'm imagining maybe for workers, perhaps. There was also some off-site parking that people had passes for. This was a worker who was killed. I could see that taking place, to be honest with you. And then the whole chaos with Scheffler. So I was probably like a lot of people. I get up pretty early on my own. I woke up about, 10 till 7 on Friday morning and was watching our station, Local 12, watching the news. And I got a text message from a buddy who said, what's going on at Valhalla? And I said, oh, I don't know. I guess rain, I'm assuming. So I take a quick peek and I went, oh, wow. So some guy got killed. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, that's Scottie Scheffler in handcuffs. And my first thought was, oh my God, Scottie Scheffler killed the guy. Holy cow. But what a wild morning that was.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange story because, I mean, we do have this death that happened. It's terrible. That's sad. It's a serious thing. And no one is making light of that situation. At the same time, there is this separate story that happened afterwards that is the number one golfer in the world getting arrested as he's trying to make his tee time at the event. This is a crazy story, and there are funny things that come with it. There were a ton of funny tweets and other social media posts that came with it. I know a lot of people were laughing about that. So it's kind of like we all acknowledge the sadness of the death situation, what happened there. But there is a funny part of this that everyone's going to talk about too, and both can be true and discussed at the same time, I think.
Well, Rick, on Saturday, my son-in-law and I, four of us went. My son-in-law and I were walking around on our own for a bit while the ladies did the shopping in the PGA shop.
To be clear, you went on Thursday for a practice round.
Yeah, Wednesday practice round, Saturday for the third round.
Right. Okay.
So we went down twice. So he said, what's the over-under of some kind of free Scottie Scheffler T-shirts we're going to see or shirts we're going to see? I said, I don't know. He goes, I'm going to set it at 9.5. We got to 6, but we also had, and we counted them, we got the under, surprisingly. We also had 3 dudes in orange jumpsuits, orange LMPD jumpsuits. So
that's great.
People were making light of it a little bit.
Well, our friend and former colleague, Jed Demusey, this is like his element. He is a big golf guy, and more so, he's really into like the minutia, the oddities, the stories within golf. He's very much into this. So he does a podcast. We've chronicled it here on our podcast before, made fun of him a little bit. He did a podcast this week already. He was at the event. He was there when it happened. And he told a funny story on his podcast where there was like a dad had asked if his little kid could stand in front of him to get a better view. And he said, yeah, no problem. The kid stands in front of him, and the kid had a free Scotty shirt on. And this was hours after it happened.
Dude, I figured that people had already gotten that quick to do something like that. Yeah, I didn't see that particular picture. That's great.
It was funny. Jed said the dad, said he made his wife come home from work, I guess, to make it on the cricket machine or whatever. And then so he and his son could go there and show it off. And then she went back to work. What a day for her. Skinny, here's another question I have about this whole situation. Louisville's police department, as I mentioned, is holding a press conference about this right now. They had reports coming out yesterday where they have officials kind of leaking information of like, we're not real comfortable with this. Maybe these charges should have been downgraded already, that type of thing. Why on earth do they not just want this whole thing to go away?
Well, that's a great question. I think there is some protocol to it. I don't think a couple of those arresting officers knew who he was. Not that absolves any of this, mind you, but I truly think this was a total miscommunication of a guy directing traffic who didn't understand that, hey, even in circumstances like this, if it's an official car marked, just wave them through. I think Scheffler, it seems like, assumed that he was being waved through, wasn't. And then we have did Scotty drag an officer with intent, or did this guy jump on the car and get dragged because he was trying to be hero man? That's the part I think that I don't even know, because that grainy video, whatever we're going to see, is probably not going to do it justice. So I don't know, man. I will say this. If a police officer says stop, I think you should stop. I think that's a pretty simple process. But again, we don't know exactly how that all went down.
Yeah, I feel like it's very obvious there was a miscommunication here.
Yes.
Regardless of like which side you want to take, or like everyone wants to make this all like the old political arguments we've been having and the social justice arguments we've been having, but now there's this weird element because it's like a white golfer who's involved with it. So like there's all these things that everyone want to drag in and make it about more than it is, the Breonna Taylor case, all that type of stuff. It has nothing to do with any of that. This feels very much like a situation where there was a miscommunication in a dark, confusing, highly tense area where a death had just happened. I think this is one where you go, look, emotions were running high, mistakes were made, things weren't communicated clearly, no harm, no foul, let's all move on. It doesn't sound like this officer is like too severely injured or anything like that. So I think at this point, if I'm the Louisville police, I just want to say, look, we've had enough bad publicity. Let's go ahead and make sure we kind of don't stay in the news any longer than we need to over this.
Yeah, and have Scotty Scheffler pay for the officer's $85 pair of pants, right? I mean,
Jed was very worked up about the $80 pair of pants too. That was a weird detail of all of this.
Yes, it was. But so that have that make that go away, right? Just, hey, Scotty, pay for the guy's pants. I thought he said his piece very well on Friday. I really did. And now we'll find out more. Hopefully find out exactly what did take place.
Okay, can I tell you what I actually think is happening here? What I really think is taking place?
Fire away.
What happened last year during the PGA Championship, Skinny? What was the big story? We talked about it.
I can't even remember.
Michael Block.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And
I
saw him, as a matter of fact.
It was all this silly, hole-in-one Michael Block, this crazy zany guy. It was good pop for the PGA. Did well for them, I'm sure. Did well for golf. They're battling live right now, so that's probably good for them to get that type of media publicity. Why just raise the stakes a little bit next year? You know what I mean? They saw how it worked with Blocky last year. Why not just up the ante a little bit this year? I think this whole thing might be staged. I'm honest to God, I really think it might be fake.
A man died. I don't think that was fake.
No, but I think that part's real. But the Scheffler and handcuffs thing, I don't know. I don't know.
It was bizarre. Was it? That was literally.
Are we sure this officer is not a paid actor? The one that got dragged? Is he a stuntman?
Maybe that's why he's got an $85 pair of pants.
That's what I'm getting at, Skinny. Thank you. You get it.
He's got the $85 pair of pants. I don't have an $85 pair of pants, do you?
No real police officer in the city of Louisville has an $85 pair of pants for work or otherwise.
Maybe he
that's
does.
an actor.
Maybe they're specially made. Maybe they're specially made pants.
Yeah, out in California for the Actors
For the
Guild.
actor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick Shelton.
Yeah. Skinny. The
Rick
other
Dalton.
thing,
It was Rick Dalton. Once upon a time in Hollywood. Yeah, what Rick Dalton.
There you go.
The actor. There you go. Yeah.
The other thing that was talked about, and again, our boy Jed was all fired. Go and listen to his podcast.
I'm gonna have to now.
Yeah, Tough Sledding is the name of the podcast. But he was very worked up, and other golf fans were too, about how easy this course played. What were your thoughts on that? Was that a major issue for the tournament?
Well, I mean, the rain made it really soft, and I mean, they were pin hunting all week long. It was long, but you got so many bombers out there. I mean, they played that thing at 7,600 yards. And trust me, somebody who walked that entire course on Saturday, the elevation changes on the back nine. I mean, it's exhausting. There was a time where I looked back up. I came down 13. We finished the day sitting on 13th green, which is that island green on that short par 4. They had a nice little vantage point. So we said, let's just sit here for an hour, watch all the leaders come through. We'll go over to 17, watch 17, and then leave before it becomes a madhouse. And at one point, I'm like, I was sitting on bottom of 13. It's like kind of at the very bottom of a valley. And I thought, man, I kind of want to go back up and watch 18 real quick because it's right at the intersection of where 13's tee box is. And I started to go up the hill. I went, nah, to hell with it. I've walked this hill too many damn times. So it really is. I think it is a tough course that was set up difficult. But again, because of the soft conditions, you could pin hunt. I would love to see if that was bone dry. I would say the scores would be no better than 8 under for the winner because you'd have had a lot of shots that got into greens that would have rolled off one side or the other. You'd had a lot of 3 putts going on, in my opinion. I don't think it was set up easy. I think the rain all weekend made it easy. I mean, it rained a bunch on Friday, didn't rain at all on Saturday, and we still had to walk through really muddy areas on Saturday.
But is it true that, like, of the players who made the cut, the overall score, they beat the previous lowest record by like over 100 strokes?
Well, hell, what's his Bryson DeChambeau actually kind of
shot 64 and lost.
He set the record for the lowest 4-round score in a major, only to have it then top when Schauffele made the birdie right behind him to go to 21 under. So you had 2 of the lowest scores in major tournament championship history. But Valhalla's played tough before. It'll play tough again. Again, they played it at 7,600 yards. The soft gauge. I mean, you had guys on par 5s that were sticking it from 260 yards out. I mean, you don't stick that; it usually bounces and rolls a little bit. They were sticking it from 260 yards out.
Will Valhalla get to host a major again?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
This is it. He said they're done.
Nah, I don't think so. I will say, the whole situation on Friday was weird. I know everybody was talking about how, well, that's it for Valhalla. That's cost them. I don't think it will because it's held a Ryder Cup. It's held an international competition before and held it very successfully. It's held majors before and held them very successfully. This was just a weird confluence, again, from the low scores because of the rain to the man's death to Scheffler in handcuffs. It was a weird confluence of events. I do think they'll get another one day.
Can I make one more comment on the way things played out Sunday? I assume you were following like kind of the fans backing Bryson DeChambeau.
Oh yeah, I watched probably last. I got home from an event I was doing for the Reds. I got home and probably watched the whole back nine for the leaders.
Only in golf can a guy like this become some like celebrity, some like polarizing figure who's very interesting to watch. He's an absolute zero. I don't understand why this guy is famous, why he's popular, why people think he's polarizing. I mean, he is an absolute zero. He has zero personality. He has a YouTube channel that's very popular. And the whole time he's just out there saying like 2 words at a time, like, good shot, good shot. I mean, he does nothing interesting. He has golf is such a loser sport. I don't know how people love this.
I love golf. I hate to tell you, I love it. But I will say for DeChambeau, I think it's the memory of him being so bulked up for those couple of years and him being able to just out-muscle golf courses. And obviously he's lost some of that, but he still can hit it a long way and still out-muscle courses. I think those guys are fascinating to people.
I agree with that. And I think if he leaned more into that still, he'd be more interesting. But this whole, like, I'm a YouTube personality and I'm so popular thing now, and like people are actually buying into it, it just tells you how boring golf is that he's the most popular golfer. It
will also tell you, I saw some guy today on ESPN, on SportsCenter, I guess it was, not SportsCenter, it was the ESPN morning show that they simulcast. Some dude named Speed, who's apparently some streamer that's hugely popular. I don't even know who he is. And then I watched him for 2 minutes. I go, this guy might be the dumbest cat I've ever watched in my life. Yet he's got millions and millions of people watching him. It'll show you that I think you can get into a YouTube or a streaming wormhole and never come out and go, oh, that's okay. I'll just zone out to this for a while.
Yeah, I mean, well, also, if you find a platform there and you build some popularity in one of those spaces, you can be completely unknown to the rest of the world and be like a total millionaire and hugely popular and I mean, look at the way people were supporting Bryson DeChambeau, who a year or two ago was kind of like the guy no one liked, right?
Yeah, just because he was part of it was the live situation as well.
Right.
Do you know who Speed is?
Yes, well, him and Sketch. There's a guy called Sketch too, and they're like both really popular right now, right? Is that?
I guess
the guy who always puts his finger up and says "brother."
Yes,
that's Sketch. And then I've seen the other guy too. I think that's Speed that you're talking about.
Whatever.
But yeah, they're all over social media.
Whatever.
This podcast has never sounded older than you and I trying to break down popular streamers. And
correct. Yes, correct.
All right, let's. I assume there's nothing else to get to on the golf front. Can we move to Bengals here?
No, I love those situations. It was cool to see. Heath the Gallows' dad came down and was literally standing right next to us, and my daughter was talking to him for a little bit. Couldn't have been nicer. Just you don't see those kind of things at other events. It's just a weird mix. It really truly is. And for those that are golfers, I think that's the thing that makes it so popular, because golf is obviously a very popular sport to play.
Yeah.
For those who are golfers, when you watch what these guys do, it's like, good Lord, that is just insane how good they really are. Yeah,
it is, but man, it's a weird event to go watch. I find it very strange watching people watch it.
I think the relatability of it is we all who play can hit shots and feel like, hey, we've hit a handful of really pure shots. So you relate to what they do. I can't relate to somebody dunking a basketball. I cannot. I've hit a 94 mile an hour. I can't relate to somebody hitting a 100 mile an hour fastball. I can't relate to breaking a tackle of a 270-pound man. Very few people can relate to those things, right?
Yeah, Skinny, if I wanted to watch people do things that I was able to do, I'd just go out in the backyard. You know what I mean? I want to watch the best of the best do athletic things that I could never do. That's the whole point of the entertainment to me, personally.
There you go.
All right, let's move on. Bengals. T. Higgins still hasn't signed his franchise tender and isn't expected to by next week, which would make him ineligible to report back to the Bengals in time for their OTAs. Higgins can't rejoin the team until he signs, Skinny. That brought up a lot more conversation about T. Higgins over the last week. More talks about trade requests, potential trade rumors, all that type of stuff. Personally, based on what I've heard, it seems like this is all just par for the course and everything that you've said was going to happen, right?
This is literally the Jesse Bates playbook, too. Jesse Bates did the exact same thing played out with Jesse Bates. And then in August, he decided when the preseason was about over, time to sign my tender. And that's the same thing that's going to happen with T. Higgins. He was never coming to the voluntary stuff. Never expected him to. And in fairness, it's a smart business decision. You want to suddenly suffer a freak injury in an OTA like Jonah Williams did as a rookie? No, and I don't expect him to be a part of that. Mandatory minicamp, until he signs his contract, he's not subject to fine for not going, so he doesn't have to go to that. He literally doesn't have to show up until he signs the tender. And it comes back to, you want to sign the tender, that's your prerogative, my man, but nobody's going to give you big bucks next year. They're going to give you a 1-year prove-it deal because you didn't prove it with the Bengals. And you pissed away $21.8 million? No, he's not pissing that away. That's why when I saw this I'm on vacation, but I saw this story, I'm like, what a non-damn story. What are we doing? This is just the way this plays out.
But this is a thing that keeps happening. It happens a lot on like the college athletic side for us who cover the teams closely. Like John Rothstein or Jeff Goodman or something will go and they'll tweet something out publicly that's been common knowledge for 2 or 3 months. But then when they tweet out, it becomes like this new cycle of stories and people are asking about it. They're like, oh, Rick, are you going to comment on this? Or what? It kind of feels like this is the same thing here with the Bengals, right? Like you and everyone else who cover the Bengals closely have said this is exactly how it's going to play out for a month or two now. But then I think a Schefter or someone put out the tweet that said that basically laid out the details of this situation exactly as we just talked about it. And all of a sudden, people are kind of like panicking again, and the fan base is getting worked up, and people are talking about new trade rumors that might happen. And it's like, this is, like you said, a total non-story. This is nothing unexpected.
Yeah, correct. It'll be a story if the first regular season game is played and T. Higgins has not signed his tender. At that point, it is a big story. That's not going to hapen. In fact, I think I saw a companion story to this where Jesse Bates talked about this of, I let this play on my head. I shouldn't have. I did. but I ended up signing and playing and finally got paid. T's going to do the same thing. In fact, literally, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to sign, he's going to play, he's going to ball out, he's going to get paid. That's how this works. It was kind of like the Trey Hendrickson stuff from last week where I told you I was one of the few that didn't go talk to him that day because I'm like, no, dude, you've already let this play out. You made your little baby threat. It was ridiculous when you made it. We all called you out when you made it. And then suddenly you realized, oh, yeah, I really don't have much leverage here. You showed up. Okay, great. And what then? Now all of a sudden, I just want to be a Bengal. I want to win. Sure, whatever, man. You want your sacks and your money. That's what you want. Okay, just honestly knock it off.
Yeah, we've also got to remember, like, these guys he's working out. It's not like he's going to be out of shape when he shows up.
Right, correct.
These guys are in this structured life, basically from the time they start high school football or maybe even younger, all the way through until their career is over. This is one of the very rare occasions within that where you have some control and you can basically say, I'm going to do the workouts and all those things on my own terms. I'm not showing up to all the mandatory stuff that I'm supposed to be at. It's just a little bit of break from all the structure of your off season. Guys like to take advantage of that. It's sort of like you'll see it in the transfer portal now with college athletics. Some guys will wait like, oh, I got to finish up classes and do a few things here at my other school before I report over to my new school. It's like, well, in reality, I'm just getting out of about a month of extra workouts that I don't want to show up to.
Yeah, and the same for Jamar Chase at the moment. This stuff's voluntary. He hasn't showed up. Do I expect Jamar Chase to come to mandatory minicamp? Now, he would be subject to fine because he is under contract. But let's not forget, he's also in that window of looking to get an extension, even though he's already been given the fifth year option taken care of for next year. But for him, he's in that mode of, I don't want to get hurt and suddenly cost myself whatever leverage. So I fully get that. I think Jesse even did that too the year that his extension. T didn't show up for a couple of weeks last year, then did show up and just said, I think he got a little cold feet there where he's like, yeah, man, maybe I should be there and show some good faith and maybe they will extend me. They obviously didn't. They obviously slapped the franchise tag. Listen, I don't think anybody should blame T. Higgins for what's taking place at the moment. I don't think anybody should be blaming the Bengals for anything that's taking place at the moment. This is just how this stuff plays out. And do I expect to see a 235-pound Jamar Chase and a 242-pound T. Higgins at camp? Of course not. To your point, they're going to be in shape and ready to go.
Although, let's not rule anything out. I kind of like the idea. That sounds like an interesting lineup you could roll out there.
Yeah, but if
a little bully ball.
If they're suddenly rolling out 4.68 40s and 4.71 40s, I don't think that's what you want.
Well, I mean, maybe in the red zone, though, it'd be an interesting.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call.
Just a little box out there. Skinny, the Bengals will induct the 2024 Ring of Honor class during a primetime Monday Night Football game on September 23rd against the Washington Commanders. Bengals season ticket members and suite holders will get to select the two former players to be inducted in the Ring of Honor this year. And voting starts Wednesday. It continues through June 7th in the Bengals app. There are 11 former players on the ballot. We talked about this last year. The part that stinks about it is that they just take the two names off that made it from each year, and they just leave you with like a shorter list. It started at like a list of 15 or whatever, and now we're down to 11.
Yeah, and from what I understand, that's being done by intent. They're probably going to start to add in a couple of years the AJ Greens of the world, the Geno Atkins of the world, those guys. I think for them right now, I think they want to keep it at a list where you do try to get the older guys in as much as possible. I don't think all those guys on that list, I'll be frank, and I'm not going to name them by name, deserve to be in the Ring of Honor. I think there's a handful that probably don't. But I don't mind them shrinking. I don't want it to be shrunk to suddenly 4 names and 3 of them you're like, yeah, I got to pick 2. I'll pick these 2. I don't want it to get to that point, and I don't think it will. I think they just want to get some of these older guys in to the point that we talked about. Then just do a giant class to start with, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a list of guys that you're just dictating to the fans, you have to put these guys in at some point, then just go ahead and do that because otherwise you're not really letting the fans vote. Like what you're doing right now, even the list I look at now currently, I'm kind of like, give me a couple more options. All these guys could be in there, but there's not obvious names to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, I got 3 easy options. I do.
All right. Well, the two inductees who last year, we should say it was Chad Johnson and Boomer Esiason, which were the 2 names that I mentioned actually on our show. And the other one that I had thrown out there along with Boomer, I said Boomer or Dave Lapham. So I will say Dave Lapham will be in the mix this year. And they will be joining Ken Anderson, Willie Anderson, Paul Brown, Isaac Curtis, Boomer Esiason, Chad Johnson, Anthony Munoz, and Ken Riley in the Ring of Honor. Like I mentioned, Dave Lapham was the other guy I thought would be in last year. If Boomer didn't get it, Boomer did get it. So I think Dave will definitely be in this year. Who else do you like, Skinny?
Yeah, The thing about Dave, I just don't know if enough people vote for him on his playing career, and that's probably fair. It was a good career, not a great career.
I
He's
don't
on
think
this
it's
list,
about that.
obviously. It's not about that.
Yeah.
But I just don't think he gets enough juice in that regard. And I've always said, I just think they need to just induct Dave and call it a day themselves. For me, though, on this list, there's probably 4 names from which I would choose. And I probably could pare it down to 3, and I certainly would pare it down to 2. The guys that would be on my radar for this would be James Brooks, Chris Collinsworth, Corey Dillon, Lamar Parrish. And Lamar Parrish has been a no-brainer for me from Jump Street. I've made a case he should be in the Hall of Fame. He literally was from Pro Football Reference, one of two all decade from the 1970s cornerbacks, one of 2 first teamers. You know who's a second teamer? Ken Riley. Behind, Lamar Parrish. Lamar Parrish was ridiculous. I get it. He played in the 70s. 90% of the audience didn't see him. I did. That's why I'm stumping for him. He was an all-time great that unfortunately never really got his just due, in my opinion. He is still 5th in NFL history in non-defensive touchdowns. Never mind him being a great cornerback. He was a great return man. It's too easy for me. I probably would vacillate between Corey Dillon and James Brooks. To me, James Brooks is the greatest all-around running back in Bengals history. I wrote a column last year when Corey, if you remember, Paul Dehner, The Athletic, did a story where Corey was pissed and said, John Kitna will get in the Ring of Honor before I do.
Yeah.
And I wrote a column saying, listen, I don't think you are quite there yet. I did say that I think he had a better case for the Hall of Fame based on what he then did with the New England Patriots. Being a big focal point of a Super Bowl champion, his numbers certainly are very Hall of Fame relatable. And certainly people could argue he's the best all-around running back in Bengals history. He was not quite the receiver James Brooks was by any stretch. He was nowhere near the blocker James Brooks was. And James Brooks also didn't carry the ball as much as Corey. Not Corey's fault, but James Brooks averaged 5 yards a carry. I think 5.1 off the top of my head. That dude was an all-around dude. So for me, if it was my vote, I would go James Brooks, Lamar Parrish.
So as always, I think you have the right answers. Like I agree with your take on that. I think that's legit. And I think that's the better option to go with. Like that's what fans should do. I think I have a better judgment on what fans will do based on like my age right now.
As well. Yeah.
And because like last year, I had a feeling that Chad and Boomer were going to be the 2 biggest names amongst the fan base. And you were like, Boomer, no shot. And he got in.
Yep.
And I think that's one where it's just popularity of the name. And I think Chris Collinsworth is going to be that guy this year. I
don't know. I'm not sure Bengals fans are all that enamored with Chris Collinsworth, the analyst.
You could be right about that. There could be enough people that have flipped the other side of like they're annoyed by him now. And I was wondering if Boomer might be in that same boat too, because it feels like there are a lot of people that kind of gotten annoyed by Boomer over the years of him being an analyst, being more of a New York guy and all of that. But he still got it last year. So here's my thing, Skinny. When I look at this name, for a fan who's like in the 20 to 45-ish age range, 20 to 40 maybe, these names don't do a lot for you in terms of like pop or the average fan, not the guy who's really locked in and like knows the stats of the players from the 80s and all that. I don't know, the guy who's like a casual Bengals fans that went to game with their dads and knows what the team did mostly throughout the end of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. The names that are going to pop are going to be Corey Dillon, Chris Collinsworth, and Dave Lapham, I think. I'm telling you, Dave Lapham, I agree with you on that. He doesn't get as much respect, and his playing days obviously weren't as impressive, but I think just his name recognition, being around the team and the franchise as long as he has and doing the broadcasting, I think that's going to put him over the top this year or next.
Yeah, I hope I root for Dave. I'm in the media room with him all the time during the season. I enjoy conversations with Dave and respect his work for sure. And again, I'm old enough to have seen him as a player, and he did start in the Super Bowl. So there is some chops there as a player, just not quite as much as the others. And I don't think your point is wrong. I'm just going to be sad if Lamar Parrish passes and doesn't make this, and people don't fully understand how great that dude was.
But that's why the Bengals might to your original point, they might need to have they can't really do it now, but they should have originally just said, hey, here's initial group that are going in, right, because and pick out the guys like Lamar Parrish, who fans probably aren't going to remember and probably aren't going to get in with the fan vote. That should obviously be in. He's an obvious one. I think there's, there were probably a couple others that are already in now that would have been in that initial group too.
Yeah.
Maybe you could have put it in some like owners, coaches, things like that might not get the fan vote. That would have made sense. But I do kind of wish they would have done that, because I see exactly what you just spoke about happening to Lamar Parrish, where he's just not going to get the fan vote. And it is a shame, because he's a no doubt should have been probably first ballot Ring of Honor guy.
No question. Absolutely. 1000%. Arguably, to me, behind Anthony Munoz and maybe Ken Anderson, the third greatest player in Bengals history. Yeah.
And I wouldn't argue with that, but he just definitely doesn't have that type of popularity with the fan base, especially the current fan base.
You're right.
Yeah. Skinny, another thing, the Bengals officially announced some major upgrades to Paycor Stadium that are aimed at improving the overall fan experience on game day. The Bengals will make a private investment of up to $120 million for these upgrades, which include updated video and audio systems, improvements to concession stands, and other general beautification projects. Construction on the new upgrades will continue through 2026. Are you hearing anything about these? What'll be interesting about them?
The only thing I would say is I think you're seeing both sides, because the county's kicked in some money too. The county commissioners have kicked in some money. They did that was reported a couple of weeks ago. I think you're seeing both sides try to do as much good faith things like this
when it comes to the county and the team.
Yes, when it comes to lease negotiation terms, they each feel like they've done their part. The county's going to feel like, hey, we kicked in our necessary money, so here's what we think the lease term should be. And the Bengals go, well, wait a minute, now we kicked in our part. Here's what we think the lease term should be. So I do think there's certainly Paycor needs some renovations. It feels crazy to say this. I mean, it's going to be a 25-year-old facility. It feels like it just opened 2 days ago, right?
It's hard to believe.
That's the crazy part. And if you think about it, old Riverfront Stadium / Synergy Field, it only lasted until 1999 technically for football, because that's when Paycor opened. A little bit later for baseball because of when the Great American Ballpark opened. But I mean, that was like a 3-decade park. We're 5 years from this being a 3-decade stadium. And
so when did Riverfront open?
Riverfront opened in 70.
70. Okay.
Yeah.
So that and it's funny you say that, because I had that same thought of like, it can't really be that old that we're talking about building a new Paul Brown Stadium, right? But then I remember when it was built, I was a little kid, and my next door neighbor took me down with his son to go view the new stadium. I was like, hell, I've got a kid of my own. I'll probably be doing that when they build the new one for the Bengals. It's like, I guess it has been that long.
Yeah, no, I think these things are necessary. You can keep the structure, keep the thing, but I think a lot of this is a little bit of politicking for when the time comes for the lease conversations to take place. Again, kudos to both sides, because at least things are getting done that need to get done to make that a better experience.
Are there any upgrades that you've heard of specifically that you think are going to be good, or that the fans will be excited
about?
It
sounds like the whatever they're doing from the LED perspective is going to be even better. I even think that's a pretty good experience right now as it is, to be quite frank. It looks pretty good to me. I know they're widening a plaza area. That probably doesn't seem like it's going to affect people, but maybe that helps some ingress and egress. I don't go in that way, but I saw the rendition of it. Obviously, they're doing some things inside the stadium. We're actually the times we've gone down there in the off season, we're going into these satellite locker rooms because they're still redoing the locker room area. I'll be interested to see what that looks like when it's done. So they're trying. I'll give them that. The report card, I think, has helped push them along a little bit. I do, but that's part of what the report card, I think, was all about, of kind of outing teams, of going, hey, we've been telling you this. Maybe you don't want to hear it, but this is what we'd like as players. And when the report card comes out, there's a little more public shaming to it of, okay, well, yeah, all right, well, we'll redo the locker room for you.
I love the NFLPA report cards. We talked about it on the show maybe a month or two ago when they came out. It created great content. It was actually interesting to hear those insights about the franchises, hear some things confirmed, or maybe like, oh, actually, hey, they're doing pretty well in certain areas that you may not have expected. And not just the Bengals, other teams, but also it's kind of led to real action, I think, like we're seeing it in this case. So I've enjoyed those. Also, one more thing here on the Bengals front, Skinny. Alex Kay of Bleacher Report wrote a piece highlighting the most overrated player at each position in the NFL entering the 2024 season. And for offensive line, he chose Bengals left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. He wrote, after the 2022 season, the Cincinnati Bengals signed Brown to a 4-year, $64 million deal in free agency. That put Brown in the top 5 at his position for total contract value and guaranteed money, as well as the top 10 for average salary. However, Brown went on to have arguably his worst campaign as a pro last season. He earned a middling 66.1 PFF grade by allowing 7 sacks and drawing 3 flags across 1,058 offensive snaps. Skinny, is it fair to say Orlando Brown Jr. is one of the most overrated players in the league?
No, I don't subscribe to that. Again, some of this stuff with the sack total, people get over their skis. This team throws the ball a ton. They're going to give up some sacks. And yeah, I'm not absolving him. There was times where even just watching it with my own eyes going, well, he whiffed on that one. But overall, I thought he was solid. I didn't think he was great. And you could argue that that's not commensurate with pay. Listen, all you wanted to sign him and pay him to do was protect Joe Burrow as much as possible. And I thought he did that. I mean, don't forget, you also played with that Tennessee game, you could have put Anthony Munoz, Forrest Gregg, you name the 5 greatest linemen in history, and Joe Burrow was a sitting duck that day because he had nowhere to go and no mobility to do it with. Was that the offensive line's fault that he got decked a bunch that day, or is that got no answers because the guy can't move?
Yeah. Well, and Joe Burrow, something I think that people don't talk about enough is Joe Burrow himself.
Sacks.
Yeah, he has said himself, like, look, a third down play, me taking a sack, we're going to punt either way. So us losing like 5 yards on a sack doesn't really matter that much. I'm going to try to keep the play alive and make something happen because that's what I do. I don't think people consider that enough about, like, look how often he gets sacked on third down. It's probably 80% of his sacks come on third down, him trying to make something happen where he's like, well, we're going to punt if this doesn't work out anyway. So I'll say this about Orlando Brown Jr. Just basing it off of last year isn't fair because of what you mentioned with the Burrow injury, because of the fact that Burrow wasn't in the entire time. It was just a different year and a difficult year, I think, to make your transition to a new team. I don't think it's fair to judge all of his PFF grades and all of that on just what he did last season. But also, I do wonder, do you think the possibility of Burrow's injury might have let his poor play fly under the radar a little bit because it wasn't really as much of a storyline? We weren't really as focused on the offensive line play.
And that's fair and possible. And I guess we'll find out this year if you get a healthy Joe Burrow and we see Orlando Brown Jr. more and maybe in more key spots. And we don't use the calf as an excuse of, well, you chalk it up to a day where he couldn't move around. So yeah, maybe we will see that. But yeah, I mean, if you had to go down rankings of if you had to pick one overrated player based on salary, yeah, maybe that's the guy, maybe. Yeah. And I get the exercise. We all love lists.
Yeah, let's face it. Most of this has to do with the fact that they found how much he was paid and then found his PFF grade and, lined those two things up. So, I'm with you on that. But I do think it's an interesting thing to at least keep an eye on, I think, going into this year, that he didn't really perform up probably to the number that you were expecting in terms of what you paid him.
No, fair enough. I mean, and again, this was a guy who was a perennial Pro Bowler who wasn't, right? So, I mean, the rest of the league kind of agreed with that.
Yeah. All right, the Reds, Skinny, they are 2-4 since we last spoke. They're 20-29 overall, dead last in the National League Central, 8 games back of the first place Brewers. They've lost 8 of their last 9 home games and 16 of their last 20 games overall. I saw a graphic on Twitter that was getting circulated that showed the Reds currently lead the majors in games played against teams leading their division, which in other words means they've played more games against the best teams in baseball than anyone else. Combined with some guys returning here, is the strength of schedule lightening up a reason for optimism if you're a Reds fan right now?
Yeah, I don't know. It would be a reason for optimism because, yes, they have gone through a gauntlet. We all knew that. We all knew that was coming. It wasn't like it took us all by surprise, right? It was like, oh, my God, May looks like it's going to be disastrous. And it's pretty much been disastrous, especially when you couple it with the injuries. When they had everybody all hands on deck last year, remember they went on a crazy wild run to get themselves back into it. The thing is the timeline for some of these guys. When is it? We know when Marte is, but when is CES and when is Matt McClain and when is Friedel? If it's not until, after the All-Star break for the vast majority, I don't think that's probably enough time to make a run even with an easier schedule. But yeah, it will be interesting to see if they can't make hay when the schedule gets easier. And I guess it kind of starts next week when the Cardinals come to town for the Memorial Day series. If you can't make hay there, then obviously it's a lost season. So I think we revisit this in about 2 or 3 weeks because it is a chance to start doing that and then start adding part by part by part. The question is, when do you get those parts back?
Does the expanded wild card make you feel better right now as a Reds fan? I mean, they're 8 games out of first place in the division, but it's 4.5 games in the last wild card spot. So where you're not dead right now.
No, it feels like you're not, but it's hard to feel. It's hard to be excited when they win a game, lose 3 games, win a game, lose 2 games, win a game, lose 3 games. And it feels like it's all follows the same pattern, right? Of it's just one night a guy doesn't pitch well. Like last night, Nick Martinez gets, battered around and so does the bullpen. And, scored 3 runs. You are allowed to win 3-2. And it was a night where they didn't. And then there's days where, you give up 2 runs and you have 2 hits. And it just feels like the two never mesh this year whatsoever.
Have you seen the splits for Martinez between him as a starter versus him as a reliever?
I have not, but I would be willing to bet you that the splits of him as a reliever are so much significantly better. And that's what I thought he always was. I mean, I get you need to fill 5 starting spots, and Nick Lodolo's hurt at the moment, and he's kind of the tag you're it guy. But it always just felt like, and if you always look at it, he just seems like he's that great guy that you can piggyback for a 3 or 4 inning stint coming in cold. He just seems to be able to do that.
Well, him and Suter this year, like they've given them some real versatility on days where they've needed it, and I think that has helped. One thing about Martinez, though, in his starts that Jeff Carr from Locked On Reds pointed this out and actually brought up a really good point. His batting average on balls in play, BABIP, is off the charts in games that he started, to where it's like, I mean, guys are hitting almost 400 against him on balls in play when he starts versus like, below the average in relief, I think. So that's what, maybe he's just getting a little unlucky to some extent in these rare starts that he's had.
And that's possible too. But I also wonder too, for guys like that when you're a starter, you're trying to, I don't know, you're hoping to get to a third time through the order, right? So you're trying to save something or save a work pattern possibly. You're not saving, a specific pitch, but maybe a pattern of way you're pitching.
There's more of a rhythm tally you're approaching it. Yeah.
And I just wonder if he comes in relief going, I'm probably only going to get 3 innings here. I'm only going to go through the order 1 time, maybe 1.5 times. I'm just going to let it rip and do what I have to do to just get these guys out and not set things up for later. Again, I'm totally surmising here, but it kind of feels like that's what takes place.
Well, that's always been the biggest difference between being the starter and the reliever, right? It's like, I mean, if you're a guy that has great stuff or only has a couple of pitches, the reliever role is usually better for you because it's like, just go out and go 110% for 30 pitches in that 1 or 2 innings, and then you're done. You'll never see those guys again versus having to work through the lineup, think about how you're setting a guy up for this first time versus the second time and all of that. I think there's some real validity to that.
And Rick, and I did this a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago when it was a bad Red staff, and I was trying to come up with some kind of out of the box way of, other than just doing the opener concept, I was kind of doing the 2 pitcher a day or 3 pitcher a day concept. And it was some guys where literally, if you saw their first 50 pitches of a start, teams are hitting 185. The next 50 pitches, teams are hitting 383. There's got to be some truth behind those numbers, right? There totally has to be. And Martinez seems like he kind of fits that bill.
Yeah, definitely. The Enquirer, Skinny, posted a story entitled "Why Elly De La Cruz Unlikely to Sign Long-Term Deal with Cincinnati Reds." It was by the Cubs fan that everybody hates that works for the Enquirer. All the fans get worked up about him now. I don't get what Gordon Whitmire. Gordon Whitmire. Yeah, I don't buy into that stuff. I don't really think his job is to be a Reds fan. So I don't know why fans get so upset about him liking the Cubs. But he does write some interesting things from time to time. And I'll say this piece starts out like this. It says, if it looks like the Cincinnati Reds face a sense of urgency over the next 4 months after digging an early season hole, imagine the urgency they face in competing over the ensuing 5 years. It goes on to talk about how the Reds likely won't be able to sign Elly to a long-term extension because of Scott Boras, basically.
Same for Matt McClain.
Yeah, it's not necessarily wrong or a crazy thing to think like this, that the Reds won't be able to sign Elly 5 years from now, or won't be able to sign him to a long-term extension before the 5 years are up. Do you have an issue with it being published right now? Because this obviously got the fan base all worked up this week.
I don't. I mean, obviously you're looking for things to write in a time where a team's losing, so you're trying to find some of those things. I don't, and he's not wrong. I brought this up to Charlie Goldsmith last year, and he said, I said, at what point do you try to wrap those guys up? And I didn't even think about that. He goes, don't forget who they're represented by. And I said, I don't even know who. He goes, Scott Boras. I said, oh, that's going to be problematic. He said, absolutely. And it is problematic because of the way he plays some real hardball. I mean, we saw he has some of his guys who didn't even sign until the last minute this year who were good players, but it was the price tag that teams just kind of went, no, not going to get there, guy. And finally somebody blinked.
Yeah. And I totally agree with the idea that the Reds probably aren't going to sign Elly De La Cruz long-term. I think everyone's pretty well aware of that. He's like one of the biggest names in baseball. If he continues to develop and becomes the big superstar that he is, then yeah, he's probably not signing a long-term extension with the Reds. You've got him under control until 2029 though. Just the way this starts off, it's like the team is down. Everyone's losing it a bit. And it starts off with, if you think this sucks now, get ready for 5 years from now when you can't sign Elly De La Cruz. Does it not seem a little bit like you're just kind of kicking the fan base while they're down for no freaking reason?
But I do think it shows there is the window of opportunity isn't like you think it is. It's way shorter than you think it is. You keep thinking these young guys, you got these young guys for a while. Yeah, you do. But that time goes fast, man. And we're seeing, in a way, this has become a wasted year too, a little bit, right? Because of the injuries. Because this was supposed to be a contending year, and it's not.
I think that's actually the more interesting story. And maybe what he probably should have leaned into a little bit more is like, hey, if we were all talking about a window here, the window hasn't even really opened up yet. Like, we're not actually in a window. They're not doing anything at this point of consequence. And this is going to get more. It's not going to be easy. This doesn't last forever. Maybe it was the bigger point. Maybe that's what he was getting at. It came off very much of like, hey, you guys are going to lose Ellie De La Cruz in 5 years. I mean, that's basically what it was. There wasn't any context to it other than like, hey, this may suck now, but you're also not going to sign Ellie because Scott Boras isn't going to let you. And that's really all the context that was there. So, I mean, I get where fans are coming from to some extent with this guy, but also his job isn't to be a Reds fan.
That is correct. But yeah, he'll be the starting Dodgers shortstop and they'll move Mookie Betts back to the outfield at that point 5 years from now.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the Dodgers seem to pretty much get whoever the biggest name is. So.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, switch gears here to college basketball, Skinny. The Bearcats got a big addition within the last week. They added 6'8", 205-pound Texas transfer Dylan Mitchell to end last week. He's a former 5-star prospect. He averaged 9.6 points and 7.5 rebounds per game last season for Texas in the Big 12. So he's already proven he can play at this level. He was just a sophomore last year for the Longhorns, a former top 12 prospect in the country, very highly thought of coming in as a high schooler. He was going through the NBA draft workouts and all that stuff, getting some feedback. What are your thoughts on this addition by Wes Miller?
So this is a great get, in my opinion. This is a great get. This is a guy who's proven it in the league that you're in with even more upside to come. If he comes in next year and averages, let's just go round numbers, 10 points, 7.5 rebounds, basically, that's a great get.
Better than either big man you have.
Yes. It allows you to play him as a 4 and give you some really functional forward length, just enough scoring. And again, maybe his upside's more than that. I mean, maybe he's a 14-point per game guy in a system that features him a little bit more. I don't know. But listen, I've been critical of UC this offseason. I've said, our friend Chad Brendel has said Bearcats fans have taken umbrage at that. I'm not trying to do this to be an ass, even though I can be an ass. I just didn't like what they've done. I like this a lot. I think this is a really nice get. Again, don't give me Aziz Bandago is going to be a difference maker. It comes from Utah Valley and averages 11 points and 8 rebounds. And that, if that's what he's doing there, he wasn't going to do that in the Big 12. This dude has done it in the Big 12.
Well, the one thing I will say is kind of funny is the UC fans that were getting on you before were like, he doesn't know what Ayrton Page and Tyler McKinley and Rayvon Griffith are going to do in the front. And it's like, well, clearly Wes Miller doesn't agree because he was still trying to bring in better players, right? Ahead of those guys that is going to play in front of them.
And I will say this, I've lauded Tyler McKinley. I'm not expecting a freshman to come in and compete in the Big 12 in the front court. I'm just not. And again, I think Rayvon Griffith is a nice extra part. I don't think he's a difference maker. I just don't. I hope he proves me wrong, but I just don't think he's that kind of a player.
If you're not bringing in a bona fide 5-star, like one and done type prospect right now, it's hard to pencil in a freshman for any type of production in the current climate when every single team has multiple 22, 23, 24-year-olds in their starting lineup. It's hard to come in as a freshman and make an immediate impact if you're a normal freshman. And
to your point, I didn't even think about it in those terms of the get of Dylan Mitchell. It was, again, he doesn't know what he's got in Tyler McKinley and Rayvon Griffith. And can you count on those kids in Big 12 play? Clearly he does not. If they do, it's a great bonus. And some of this is in the roster building process. Those are fine guys to have because I don't think, they're certainly not turning pro after a year. You don't have to worry about that. They're a little bit more developmental, which is great. That's fine. You may have them for 2 or 3 years. And in year 2 and year 3, they are physically ready and skilled ready to make an impact. And then whatever happens from there, be it pros, be it transfer portal, that's just the way of the world today. But again, Dylan Mitchell, I think, was an important get for them because now you don't have to rely on the kids to get it done. And I think that would have been a big ask in that league. Folks, that's a grown-ass man's league, as you saw this past year.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and think about Cincinnati was an athletic, physical, tough defensive team a lot of times, and yet they still, think about the Texas game last year where they couldn't stop Dylan Dessou to save their life late in that game. I mean, they had some issues with the toughness and physicality of that league, even with that kind of being their strength overall last year. Now, the one really interesting part about this roster as I look at it is they have some real depth all of a sudden, at least it would seem on paper based on what they brought in. And I don't know exactly how you figure out your best 5 players, or at least your starting 5 players, because it seemed to me like Jizzle is an automatic, got to start him type player. Skillings is an automatic, got to start him type players. Lukosius is definitely in the starting lineup. He's probably your best player down the stretch last year. So those 3 guys are definitely in. If you bring in Dylan Mitchell, he's definitely starting. So then, does Assis not start at the 5? I mean, do you move the Skillings play the 2 next to Jizzle, Lukosius the 3?
The thing though now with that, if you play Aziz though, is all you need him to do is be a rebounder, shot blocker, dunker at the rim finisher. You don't need to do anything offensive, and you really did in this past year, but you don't even have to worry about that. You don't have to go, boy, we wish you had another option. Maybe Dylan Mitchell's that option.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, I've heard even people mentioning Dylan Mitchell as a small forward. I don't understand where that's coming from at all. Like, I mean, 35% of his possessions used last year were dump offs or cuts. I mean, this is not a playmaker. This is not a guy who's handling the ball in the offense. Aside from that, he scored his points on transition, basically run out dunks where he got steals or was just running the floor, and then putbacks. Those are his 3 most used possession plays.
The putbacks especially are hugely important.
It's important, but if he's not a wing, in other words, he's not handling the ball, he's not running off ball screens. He's a guy that you dump it down to and he uses athleticism to finish around the basket and dunks it in. That's what he does. So he's not a 3. I almost wonder if this is a Justin Jackson undersized center situation. Like, I know Justin Jackson was maybe 15, 20 pounds heavier by the end of his career, but 6'8", only 205. Wish he was a bit bigger, but he's super freakishly athletic. If you put him at the 5, Lukosius at the 4, Skillings at the 3, Hickman at the 2, Jizzle at the 1, play small ball, or obviously he and Bandego could play together. You have to put one of those guards out on the bench, but
I think it gives you great options for certain. I mean, down the stretch, do you need length to close out a game? And then you go with the bigger lineup. Does a smaller lineup create all those great mismatches on offense, and you roll with that for? I think it does give you. I think Mark Pope's a little bit in this mix too, and I think Kentucky fans realize he's got multiple lineups to play, but how do you play them? You've got a group that could be a really good defensive group, but then a group that could be a really good offensive group. And how do you get them both on the floor, in certain situations? I think it's fascinating now how this stuff plays out for teams.
It almost feels to me like the Hickman addition may be even more important, or either that or Lukosius is going to have to really shoot well from 3 now with it, because you're going to play Mitchell a lot of minutes now that you've added him,
sure.
Which means you're going to have another really good athlete who can't shoot on the floor a lot. So it feels like Hickman or Lukosius, someone is going to have to make up the shooting here. I would think that would be Hickman, but it's interesting because it's hard to keep them all on the floor at the same time too. Or
God bless him, maybe CJ Frederick in his one final year balls out. Maybe.
True. I mean, true. That's what they expected out of him last year, and he just couldn't stay healthy enough to give them that. But maybe he'll fill that role more. It almost feels like Hickman's kind of taken a lot of those minutes in that role. But it's going to be interesting to watch this UC team play, because I do feel like the Dylan Mitchell addition it takes them up another notch, which is what they needed. Prior to this point, it felt a lot like, and we've talked about this, felt like they were just kind of running the same team back, hoping Jizzle James was going to make a massive leap and Dan Skillings was going to get a lot more consistent. Now, all of a sudden, you've got another big-time talent to go with those guys. So if they all take a step forward, including Dylan Mitchell playing a little bit better, getting a more expanded role at UC, now you really may have something that takes you up another notch in the Big 12.
Yeah, and honestly, to the point I've made in this offseason, I think they needed to add something like this, either another scorer or something like this. And this was a good get, in my opinion.
Yep. All right, let's get into some Ask Skinny Anything. Just a couple of them to wrap this one up. Of course, it is Memorial Day weekend, and most of these questions are geared in that direction. Every year, the Big East Baseball Tournament is held around this time of year. That's going on at Prasco Park as we speak today. The Xavier Musketeers are actually getting ready to play a rain-delayed game, finish off a rain-delayed game against UConn. They're tied 2-2. But how many Montgomery Inn pulled pork sandwiches could Skinny get through in 9 innings if he was eating them for free out at Prasco Park?
Probably 3. I think I could get 3. A fourth would be 3 would be a little gluttonous, but they are so damn good. And if you pace it out, that's 1 every 3 innings. That's usually a college baseball game's a good 3 hours or so. So yeah, I could probably get through 3. A fourth would probably be pushing it, in my opinion. That's the great thing. Have you been to Prasco before?
I have. Yeah.
The free food is ridiculous. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen. And the thing I think that's really cool is people are really respectful of like not going up and getting 8 hamburgers at once. It's like, just get the stuff that you need to eat and let somebody else have a turn.
Well, that part is cool. But then when you see like the families from the local community just driving to the parking lot for free dinner and leaving without even coming to the game, that's a little like, what are you doing? Come on.
That isn't what are you doing? But man, it's stunning to think about, and they're very efficient with how they do it.
They are, and the place is a fantastic baseball facility too.
Great. Yeah, it's a great facility.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on the 4. I think because the thing here is you're going to have some adult beverages with this to drink 3 or 4 sandwiches.
You get feel like you're a little bloated, for lack of a better term.
You do 2 in the first 2 or 3 innings with your beers, and then you down 1 at the end of the game to kind of,
Well, after you've had a few beers and all of a sudden
up.
you get that little hankering for one extra thing to eat. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Skinny, what is your favorite chore? Again, I assume this is a Memorial Day thing. A lot of people are going to be out in the yard this week or getting things done around the house. Power washing, mowing. What's your favorite thing to do?
I like power washing. Although
everyone loves it. It's satisfying.
I did a bad mistake though. I tried to power wash part of the garage door and I took off some of the paint at the bottom. I got too close and too powerful with it. You had that kind of like moss, not moss, it's just gross slime,
algae or whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. So I'm cleaning that off and I'm like, there's a really rough spot on the bottom. I started doing it. All of a sudden I started watching some of the paint on the garage door come peeling off. I went, oh crap. But
so now you're going to be painting this weekend.
Who doesn't love power washing?
It's great. Yeah. It's so satisfying to watch.
It is. It's like, I didn't realize all that gunk on the concrete on our concrete patio was that gunky, but it was, and now it's gone.
So I have a friend and his wife, she loves pressure washing, like does all this stuff at their house and whatever. He said she will come in and she plays a video game where you just pressure wash stuff in the video game.
Oh my Lord.
It's a real thing. It exists. And I know someone who actually plays it in real life, my friend's wife, and he said she loves it. He said it's just so satisfying her to watch things get cleaned like that.
That's hilarious.
Very strange to me, but whatever.
Yeah.
We all have our favorite porn websites. Skinny, Memorial Day weekend, do you have any stories about over drinking at a family grill out?
No, I pace myself on Memorial Day usually. That is truly, to me, that's just a good old beer sipping day, right? You're not trying to get your buzz on, you're not trying to get your drink on, but it's just a nice casual sipping some beers, kind of a day. And I'm actually going to be down here in Orlando for it. So trust me when I tell you, I will be sipping beers somewhere. I can guarantee you that.
Drinking around the world. I hear that's very popular.
Actually, when we get done with this podcast, my youngest daughter and I are going over to Epcot and we're going to ride some rides, but then we're going to finish off the afternoon and evening by drinking around the world.
Well, and that is the perfect place to end this. In that case, I will not make it last another second because I want her to go experience that with you. So that's all we got for today.
Good stuff. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for the questions as always. We will be back next week with another podcast. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.
Sure, you can stop watching, but let's be honest, you want to know more. Tap the links or even better, click subscribe to stay in the know.